What did the T-Rex say to the sausage-shaped dinosaur? You're the worst. No, I'm rather peckish. At the start of 2025, I sold my Tudor Submariner to buy a steel PanoMaticLunar and haven't looked back since. Fortuitously, during the recording of these very words, GO just released a stunning, limited platinum edition with an aventurine dial representing a starry night to complement the moon phase in order to celebrate 180 years. I mean, just look at that thing. Whew. Anyway, focus TGV, you've got a voiceover to do so. Today I share why I chose and prefer Germany's second most premier luxury brand over their vastly more expensive top dog, even if I can afford both. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Before we get into this, you know what to do. If you want to support more free and truly independent non-watch dealer content, the best way to support is to like and comment. Let me know your thoughts down below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. This is the PanoMaticLunar. I bought this shortly after my Grail purchase, which is, I know, a bit strange. Why are you buying another watch just after you've acquired your Grail? If you don't know, it's the Breguet edition. I save for special occasions. I wanted a kind of daily version of my Grail. I've always had my eye on one of these. I saw one for a little over half price, no box or papers, like new. And I leapt on it. Oh, and I should do wristwatch check. Let me do wristwatch check. Let me get it out of the way before I completely forget. The Squally 1521 black PVD. I also bought this used, and this is on a rubber cheap imitation Tropic strap. Before I got the Tropic strap, which I've since put on my Willard, this raises a really great point not to settle for this cheap rubbish. It's discoloring, attracts lint, it's just cheapo silicone. Once you go full Tropic, you don't go back, but they are expensive. And this is from Holben's, that's on my Willard. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna splurge and get another one, another 79 bucks on an identical strap. I don't know, seems a bit ridiculous, but now, you know, I've been converted. This is already disintegrating. It's very comfortable, but nowhere near the quality of this. Anyway, this has turned into a debate about straps. Let's get back to the subject, shall we? This is my third video on the massively underrated GO Pano, and for good reason. It's arguably, actually it's not arguably, it is their most iconic collection. The famed three-plate construction to the movement is synonymous with the town of Glashutte, a signature trait of the founding fathers that pioneered this area's watchmaking legacy almost 2 centuries ago. A heritage shared by GO and ALS, despite both having a tumultuous history, to say the least, and then going their separate ways, even if factory-wise they are still a stone's throw away from each other. However, the more I research and compare watch sizes and models from GO and ALS, it seems what dictated their scale is that off-centered rotor, the way it overhangs, just missing the balance bridge, and then extending beyond the confines of the top plate, confirming this. On the ladies' PanoMaticLunar, released in 2019, which I'm not ashamed to say I would gladly wear myself, with that stunning MOP dial, and before you start singing Cold as Ice, unfortunately not in reference to the legendary Brooklyn group, although the bezel is certainly iced out. I'm referring to the absolutely strepitoso mother-of-pearl dial. It was only reduced from the 40mm, like mine, to 39.4, suggesting it couldn't go any smaller diameter-wise. Otherwise, why such a random number? Therefore, we can deduce that if we go manual wind, like ALS did with their unisex Lange 1 at 38mm, we could get my Goldilocks pleasing perfect size. But stylistically, I actually do prefer GO over ALS, and I'll get into exactly why in just a moment. so I'm going to have to learn to be content with 40mm for now. Something I hear all the time bandied about is that the Geo is, or Geo in general, not just the PanoMatic, it's the poor man's ALS. And I disagree. That expression has never made sense to me because, you know, the poor man's anything. You know, like Tudor, the poor man's Rolex. Flighty, the poor man's Navitime, right? If you're spending less money, then surely you're a richer man, right? That's my logic, that's my way of looking at it, my contrarian way of looking at everything. Speaking of Holbeins earlier, I've put this on a Moleskine. It's a Saffiano blue, it's a very kind of understated blue, handmade in France no less. I reached out to Moya, who are an AD of theirs, of Geo, and I wanted to get the manuwind. The reason I didn't get the manuwind initially is because, and I would have liked to, is because I couldn't find the same deal on the Lunar. And in hindsight, I kind of wish it was the manuwind. It's a lot more solid feeling, you don't have any wobble of that rotor, of course. And what I'll do is I'll take the Saffiano blue, the Moleskine strap, and I'll put it on the manuwind to see if there's any difference in how it wears. Just listen to that. Che meraviglia, ragazzi. Raffinato come me un po', come me. However, going smaller, with my middle-aged eyes, would run the risk of everything becoming less legible without glasses. Reducing everything proportionally by around 15% would result in dial shrinkage too, to maintain that Fibonaccian harmony. Also, if I did trade my Geo for an ALS, which would undeniably be seen as a step up in prestige, the mechanically inferior way they split their date window compared to Geo would be a downgrade. And having experienced both, is the actual jump up discernible? So what about going manual wind on the Geo instead to shave off some chunkiness? It's really staggering just how much difference 1mm can make to the wearing experience, and this goes to show you, and I was wrong about this, these little details are worth fussing and, you know, obsessing about. Also, I was wrong about the value. The value of these, even at full retail, is outstanding. I don't talk about prices because talking about money is a little bit vulgar. You guys know I don't talk about investment and any of that. It's certainly an aspect you should consider, but it's not the make or breaking of a watch for me. It's about enjoyment, it's about the pleasure, it's about the design, it's about the heritage, it's about, at the end of the day, that feeling you get, right? And these absolutely do it. I have to say though, as much as I love the moon phase PanoReserve, it's much more in line with my Grail. Another little detail is there's no hidden pusher. It's a lot cleaner. The lines of the watch, doing this every day. My purchasing of the Geo was an unexpected side effect of acquiring my Grail watch. You see, this is my Beta Breguet tradition. Let me explain. You see, both timepieces share an overall dichotomy of modern, sporty, oversized scale and smaller subdials for the actual complications. They also share glorious rear ends, and I cannot lie. It's as if I got Al Pacino screaming at me.
She got a great ass!
These displays show off a plethora of haughty-taughty embellishments that puts them firmly in a tier of true handcrafted luxury. But unlike the tradition, most Pano watches are more demure, we could say, if I was Niles Crane. But at the same time, still giving me similar feels, saving dear old Graily for special occasions. Geo also is a brand that's less talked about. None of the channels, with the exception of Davide Cecchini, none of the channels I trust and follow that talk about watches ever talk about Geo. I don't really understand why that is. And bear in mind, I don't follow any watch dealers. If you're a watch dealer, it's a massive, I've talked about this before, it's a massive conflict of interest. I'm quite strict in not paying attention to any of that because it's fake enthusiasm, it's not real, it's crossing the line, but that's another discussion. So none of the trustworthy, truly independent channels talk about Geo, and it doesn't get enough attention. Geo being the underdog to Goliath ALS naturally means I root for them. They're also not insulting in how they treat potential customers, which is a reputation that unfortunately persists with ALS, along with their waiting lists and Rolex-style shenanigans. Personally, I don't like playing games, unless it's retro handhelds, Command & Conquer or Doom. But what I especially deeply respect is the transparency of Geo. They openly state that 95% of all their movements is in-house, with only hairsprings, Incablock shock absorbers, and jewels coming from sister companies within the Swatch Group, who, lest we forget, acquired Geo in 2000. In fact, actually, I think Swatch tends to forget about them as well, to be honest. I've come to profoundly admire what made in Germany actually means, a little more in recent years, with my extensive work designing for several German brands now, outside of my work for YouTube. I was watching a documentary on 1930s Italian architecture. Pre-war, there was a group called Gruppo Sette, which was 7 architects, and it was what's called a rationalist movement, which was more modern, less of the neoclassical, more of a reactionary to futurism, but manifested in architectural form rather than art. And that reminds me kind of like the confluence of stars we've got going on with Geo. ALS is much more conservative, much more austere in a certain way, is much more traditional, it's more rigid in its design influences, which is kind of ironic because ALS attracts a contingent of new money clientele trying to buy horological clout and class because they, can afford it. Where I think the classier option is Geo. It's certainly more in line with that kind of old money frugality. Not flashy, but yet has substance and still at the same time references the same legacy of watchmaking that ALS does. Another aspect is its amalgamation of German artistic traditions, of which, until now, I wasn't really cognizant of just how well balanced it is compared to ALS's equivalents, of which seem to lean more into the neoclassical dressiness. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but there's certainly no Vitruvius Britannicus. But for those uninitiated, what we see is a famed Teutonic sparseness that somehow, even if it logically shouldn't, manages to marry a Mies van der Rohe minimalist purity with flourishes of restrained Saxony Baroque. Think of this drastic contrast like the fusion food trend in high cuisine decades back. In fact, actually, I went to a fancy Japanese-Italian restaurant once. It's the sort of thing that you can only pull off if you are truly skilled and a master of both. Otherwise, you end up with an insulting abomination to either influence, or worse, both. The Opera House clock-inspired date window, with its old-world-related font, being the epitome of this in functional form, just as much as the numerous sublime hand decoration techniques. The dial spacing, with its lack of intricacy compared to Breguet guilloching, for example, mixed with a mainly contemporary industrial feeling to the case construction, is another yin to its classical yang. Separate the two disciplines and you get the sterility of a yawn-inducing nomos on one side and the classicism of a Tompion carriage clock on the other. So in conclusion, the Pano collection culminates in an irrefutable versatility, especially compared to its Richemont nemesis. It's imbued with a sense of youthfulness and sporty modernity, translating into a real-world sartorial compatibility. I actually feel I could wear it just as well with a Tony Soprano tracksuit, just as much as my Bondian Thunderball-style shirts, or for that matter, all dappered up to the nines for a Tannhauser performance. But aside from everything this watch has, the cultural significance, Dresden, a place that is on my bucket list, the Dresden Opera House that these watches reference. That's a shortcoming of the ladies one. They did a round display for that loses all kind of romance, for lack of a better expression. to the Opera House, it doesn't feel so much indicative of the brand, so that's a big drawback. They presume the softer lines are more feminine or whatever. Putting bling on a watch, putting a mother of pearl, these are patronizing, dated idea of design. I mean, what they really need to do is call Gentry Labs. Nice little plug for myself. There is no two brands in the entire world or history of it that share not only the same initial creators and mechanical idiolect, but still operate from the horological Garden of Eden that spawned them. The intrinsically linked relationship between GEO and ALS is not only utterly unique, but fast forward back to our present future, it's evolved into the physical manifestation of two types of luxury watch collector, and more profoundly, two types of approaches to high-end German watchmaking. The difference being, it seems ALS took a bite of the forbidden fruit, while GEO abstained. ALS unfortunately is cursed with a disturbing history during Germany's darkest period, along with an overly sybarite, obnoxious new money clientele it now attracts, as they attempt to buy class with branded flexing clout, along with all the pretentious, exclusionary and elitist business practices that go along with supplying it. I don't think GEO is the poor man's ALS. I think it's actually the other way round. But essentially, you're buying it for yourself, not to impress others. And I think this is a key difference. If JLC is the watchmaker's watchmaker, then GEO is the enthusiast for German watchmaker's watchmaker. Alright guys, I'm going to leave it there. Please don't forget to like this video. But most important of all, if you haven't subscribed already, do subscribe if you want to see more free and independent content. But I really want to hear your feedback. What do you think GEO are getting right and getting wrong? But 38 is my Goldilocks sweet spot. Pretty sure Glashutte could make one. I hope they do. I really hope they do. That's when I'd sell mine and go for the 38. There is a little bit of space, you know, around you just need to compress it. Maybe look at what ALS did with theirs and maintain that glorious ratio. The problem is, of course, the shrinking of the subdials. We can only hope, even though my wallet is gonna suffer. My wife's gonna kill me. Oh dear. Anyway, all right guys, thank you for watching. Onwards and upwards, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.